Hi, Eli.
Hey, how are you, Bob?
Good, you're in Baghdad.
I am in Baghdad. It doesn't look like Baghdad here. I am in the Combined Press Information Center, which is where journalists stay when they're waiting in between their embeds. And I had just returned from Kurdistan, but prior to that, I was in Baghdad, and I had through military air a tour of a few bases as I was getting to Baghdad, because with the surge going on, it's very difficult for journalists to get into theater. Usually remote for the soldiers, which is as it should be, by the way. But that's just, anyway.
Yeah, I would say they take priority in wartime. So do you have like battle gear?
I do. Well, I mean, I can show it to you. This is gonna, because I'm not on a headset, I will show you, but I have a helmet here, which I'm sort of putting on, and I could grab I'm grabbing for the Blogging Head viewer my flak jacket, which is reinforced with heavy plates, and showing it there. As best
so that's
yes.
Like
that was
an extra
thud
flak?
of my body armor, which you have to
I'm
wear.
glad
By
to
the
hear
way,
that
you
that's
have
all
to
it
wear
was.
the body armor if you're going to even the civilian airport, and you have to wear it any time you travel outside of the green zone with the military. And the military military officers and soldiers have to wear it even if they're driving around the green zone, which in light of recent events here, is becoming which is far less protected than I think many Americans would think.
There was the bomb that killed the members of parliament was in the green zone, right?
Well, yeah, that was the day I arrived in Baghdad, and I covered the story. I got siphoned. I was actually with the legislators as they were coming out of the building, and I got a chance to interview some of them. I was really impressed by how determined they were to not let this stop them from meeting. But I will say this, in subsequent reporting, I have determined that the green zone was a dumb idea. Symbolically, I think it's stupid that we took over Saddam's buildings, and you can still see the crossed swords. You can still go to his ridiculous palace, which is now the American embassy, and it's made of very cheap material, but it was he was sort of had an eye to sort of the grand Roman architecture at the time, but it's eerie. It's because it feels like the devil is still very close to the ground. Why haven't we decimated these buildings? But also, it's a huge target. There's mortar. You can hear mortar all the time. The terrorists want nothing more than to attack this place. The requirement of having so many Americans and so many Westerners that have to live here requires a lot of people. And the people who really run the international zone are Peruvians who work for Triple Canopy, referred to by some Iraqi legislators as Incas, the great Indian civilization that was in Peru. And I don't think that, I didn't mean it derogatorily. That is true. That is how Ahmad Shah will be referred to the people who basically check you what seems like every 500 meters. To get from the beginning of the green zone from the airport to get to where I am right now, we were checked 5 times.
So do you feel safe?
No. And furthermore, if you can go and you can do the research, and I confirm this, there are tunnels that are underneath the green zone to the red zone. I've been outside of the green zone, and that's also, I would tell you, not safe.
Eli, who dug the tunnels and who hangs out in them?
Well, these were Saddam-era tunnels, and some of them have been flooded, but it's a risk. And you just can tell because you can't have security all the time. I mean, there's this idea that they check you all the time, but they're checking everybody all the time. So, and, who knows how easy it is. I don't think these Peruvians who work for Triple Canopy are particularly well paid. A determined person can penetrate. They find IEDs here. They have found suicide vests here in locations. They handed over from Triple Canopy to the Iraqis the security for the Parliament building, and the sort of line that we were getting from a lot of people is, well, therefore, when the Iraqis are doing it, the security is less professional. But I don't think you can. I think that the green zone is just a bad idea at this point. It does not mean that I think I'm not in the Reed camp right now on the rest of it, but I just think that the green zone is a terrible idea. And the other thing is that everybody was here because it's unknown. You hear explosions, but you see, the barbed wire and the wall, so you can't see the rest of the city. So there's this unknown chaos out there, and you sort of wait around, and it sucks. You just wait around kind of like thinking any day now. And the other thing is there's a real fatalism. The contractors, the guys who've been here like the longest, who really don't have like the military tours or the diplomatic tours, where they get out of that, so they've seen a lot of the evolution. They're just like sooner or later, they think it's inevitable. They're gonna get hit. There's gonna be a huge attack, and it did not surprise them when they had the suicide bomber in the parliament.
Really?
Yeah. No.
So, how real a sense, how accurate a sense are you able to get, do you think, for the morale and level of confidence and optimism of the troops, all the way from senior officers to GIs? I mean, do you have random access? I mean, presumably you can't just go talk to anybody anywhere you want, right? I mean, to what extent are you guided by the PR people, and just to what extent do you think you're getting a sense?
Well, when you can get a sense because you fly with the military, and the military guys will talk to you because you wait forever because it's the military, and so they say show up at 11 and your flight doesn't leave until 4 a.m., which is fine. And you get an opportunity to talk to people, and a couple things. One, GIs do not fit any of the left or right stereotypes. I mean, they're complicated human beings, as you would expect. A lot of them, at least on the officer level, are really motivated readers, and they're constantly learning about stuff, and I find that really refreshing. I mean, I met a guy reading Herodotus whose job was a CB, so he was an engineer, but he wanted to read Herodotus because he felt that it was important for people to read Herodotus. And so there's a lot of that, and I think a lot of people feel that, there's of course a lot of people really don't like the idea that their tours have been extended, but it's not just that the tours have been extended, it's that they have no control over, they've made plans, they thought they were going to come home at a certain point, they have to change those plans, and that's really important for a lot of soldiers. So you hear a lot of that. On the other hand, you also hear a kind of sense that they don't feel, almost all the soldiers that I've met do not feel that they are an occupying army, and while some are very dismissive of Iraqis, I mean, as I said, there's no stereotype. But they also are very much of the view that it's a noble mission, or at least the idea of the mission is noble. Although some of them will tell you that they don't think it can work out, but they don't think that what America is setting out to do, or what they're setting out to do, or what they're being asked to do is a terrible thing or anything like that, which I guess, as you would expect. But the other thing is that insofar as that there is a mission, I think most soldiers believe that they should try it, and I don't think that they're as fatalistic as some who kind of speak on behalf of the military from the left side of the aisle. But, I feel uncomfortable because I've gotten a chance to get to know soldiers more, and I've talked to soldiers before, but more so on this trip, and they're human beings, and they have it's a complicated view, and they actually know those that deal with the Iraqi army or the Iraqi police are going to have insights that are frankly going to be better than, journalists and, Middle East studies experts, I think, because they're dealing and they're seeing how this problem, there are a lot of problems with it. And,
so what
and good
kind
things
of...
too. There's surprisingly good things. I want to say that too.
Okay, you want to list any of them? Or...
Well, I'll give you, you want to get into the good things now? I can tell you.
Whenever you want. I mean, what I was going to ask you broadly is what kind of information are you able to get by being there that you would not be able to get from Washington?
Okay, well, first of all, being able to talk to officers when they're not on the record actually is very useful because they feel they can they trust you not to kind of quote them or something like that when you're off the record, as they do with me and almost any journalist worth his salt, then they'll be straight with you. And I'll give you an example. I've been writing about the role of the Iranians in Iraq. The only person I've talked to here is Ahmed Shalabi, who says that that's overrated. The Iranians really are not playing that big of a role. Everybody is saying the Iranians are really involved, both Sunni and Shia. I just wrote a series of stories from Kurdistan where the Kurdish security chiefs are saying, my number one concern are the Sunni jihadist terrorists who've now called themselves Al-Qaeda in Kurdistan, coming across the border from Iran. So, first of all,
the Sunnis. The Sunnis are coming from Iran.
Well, I mean, certain Sunni groups are based there. These are primarily like the outgrowth of Ansar Islam, and it turned into Ansar Sunnah, which is different. But there also is a lot of coordination, and actually, what you're starting to hear now, even from the military, is they're starting to say on the record. If you watch what they're saying that they've found these EFPs, which they are not backing away from their view that they've got.
EFP stands for. EFP stands for
explosive formed projectile. They are the number one killer of the American soldiers right now.
They come up through the bottom of the vehicle.
Armored Humvees. And they're finding them in Sunni areas, surprise, surprise, and they're finding a lot of other connections. They're finding networks where, the way it was described to me on like sort of an off-the-record basis by one kind of senior military intelligence type guy was the Iranians have money, and they also have know-how, and they create wind-up dolls. They don't say, go attack this, go attack that, but they want to support sort of these networks of terror. Here's another interesting fact that I learned that's very interesting. Diyala, which is part Sunni and part Shia, but is a real sort of safe haven right now for the worst of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, gets 100% of its electricity from Iran. And unlike Baghdad, it's not interrupted. So people who live in Diyala, while they have to live with horrible terrorists, also can, keep an air conditioner going.
Okay, now on the issue of Iranian complicity, of course, when you get these reports in America, some people, including myself, view them with not major skepticism, I guess, but we're aware that there are people who would like to cast Iran as the villain, whether they were or not, right? There are people who would like to magnify tensions with Iran, and people who would like to subdue them. And given the whole way we got into this war, with what now turns out to have been, biased intelligence, a lot of us are skeptical. Now, what you're telling us, I guess, is, you're talking to people who you think have you feel persuaded have no particular agenda, and the consensus among them is not just that stuff is coming from Iran, but you think as a purposeful extension of the Iranian government, and ironically is not being confined to, say, Shiites. I mean, am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, I think that the view that, I don't know if people would go as far as that. And I admit to being an Iran hawk before I came here. So,
Right, I must say, two things I would not have predicted not so long ago. One is that we would suddenly wind up with a Baghdad correspondent. And the other is that it would be a neocon. Two things I wouldn't have predicted, Eli, but...
there you go. You know what I would not have predicted? That on the question of Iran and Iran's involvement in terrorism in Iraq, that the progressive side of the aisle would be in agreement with Ahmad Chalabi.
The progressive side of...
The progressive side... Your side's taking the Chalabi line.
Well, actually, no, I'm agnostic. I don't purport to know, and I'm kind of...
Matthew Iglesias and Ezra Klein are giving Chalabi talking points when they say that there's no link between Iranian terrorism in Iraq. I'm going to call them the Chalabistas. They are the Chalabistas.
My official line is just that for something to come from Iran does not mean it comes from the government, and moreover, the Iranian government is a little on the pluralistic side, I'm led to believe, so it's not even clear if it does have government support, which part of the government it's coming from. And my general feeling is, let's be clear on what we're clear on. But in any event, you're telling us...
On that,
sure.
I have to tout a story that hopefully will show up when we get this to air on the web. I interviewed I think I was the first person to interview a former Kurdish police officer who went to work for the Iranian Atalat, their intelligence ministry. He was recruited by a member of the Ansar al-Islam when I just got back from Sulaymaniyah. And he described how all of the kind of Sunni jihadist groups in Iran on that border area in towns like Marwan are issued a political refugee card that's like a get-out-of-jail-free card by the intelligence ministry and the Revolutionary Guard. And it means that you do not get hassled at checkpoints or, for that matter, border crossings. And he described also a meeting with the head of the Quds Force in 2005 in April, and I've had this confirmed by others, that he had with membership of Ansar al-Islam. So that does not, you're right, I'm talking about intelligence ministry, and there are plenty of Iran experts out there who will say that there are rival nodes of power even within those ministries. Okay? So
right.
I'm acknowledging that it's a murky subject, but I think it's also at least pretty plausible that the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who is allegedly very close to this guy who runs the Quds Force, General Qasem Soleimani, who was, I think, discussed by General Petraeus when he came to Washington this week in a press conference, that, it seems to me that it's more odds-on that this is a deliberate policy, and I can see the logic of it. Now, people do not say this, but my take as a reporter and analyst is that the Iranians have the same interest in Iraq that the Syrians had in Lebanon in the 1980s, which is to be the indispensable cop. They don't want any side to win. They just want to be able to be the only people who can bring order. So therefore, they're kind of paid a surtax, and that Iraq becomes a dominated state by Iran. And in that respect,
but do they want?
Yeah, in that respect, they back Sadr, but they also back Maliki, who are.
But
now
do they also want the
allies.
Americans out? But do they want the Americans out first of
Yeah,
all?
A, they want the Americans out, and then B, they want to make Iraq a vassal state to Iran. And that's what Syria did with Lebanon. And I think that Syria played all sides of that civil war, too. So that's, I think, the strategy.
Okay, I would say, not in defense of Iran, but as for how nefarious we should cast this activity as, if somebody invaded Mexico and it didn't go well, the occupation didn't go well, so there's a huge civil war, we would have operatives in Mexico, right? It's on our border. We would want to influence the outcome.
Yeah, but Bob, would we fight that war by telling adolescents to blow themselves up with as many civilians around them as possible? Had the Westerners ever fought a war that way?
Well, no, that is a difference, and that's. But that's a separate question from whether they are doing things inimical to our military interests look, that's a known part of the Iranian MO. That's not news. If you want to have a moral indictment against Iran, they subsidize that. There's no doubt. But as for whether they're being inimical to our military strategy is kind of something surprising and something that identifies them as more evil than anyone knew. It's kind of politics in the real world. Just the fact of them doing things.
If you want to say that this is somewhat rational behavior for the Iranians, I don't know that I would disagree with you. I think it is rational. I think it's coldly rational. It's kind of depraved by the means they choose to do it, and not particularly allied with Iraq. But I think that in terms of, at least I think it's worth for now. I had a wonderful expression from. I'm sorry, I can't give you. The best stuff is told to you on the web. But I had a long interview with a general recently here who said, kind of in the I was trying to get him to say how long is it going to take, because I wanted him to say, because everybody knows it's going to take forever. Not forever. It's going to take a really long time to stand up the Iraqi army. It's going to take a long time to bring the kind of security that we want. And that, kind of the timeline, any timeline right now is really not very realistic. Or, at least from the people, if you want to kind of complete this mission. Maybe it's not worth it to complete the mission, but I think it is worth it to complete the mission. But what he said was, we have to ask ourselves, if the Iraqis are still willing to fight for their country, then we should help them. Because, we are responsible for this transition. I'm paraphrasing. And I think that that's a good way to look at it, which is that as long as, and there are a lot of Iraqis who are turning on Al-Qaeda, I'm not saying they're going to win. I don't know, and I can't predict the future. But I'm saying that there are a lot of Iraqis who haven't given up on this place yet. And I think that at least is enough reason to try to support them. And I think that the payoff, if we can get it so that they can win, and that there is successive elections, and that there is some level of stability, is a great benefit to us for our national interest, but also I think it's a great benefit for, the region. I think that there's a lot of good things that will come out of that. But it is a question
my impression My impression was that the Sunni Ba'athists had really already turned on al-Qaeda, or at least there was real evidence of that. And if that happens, it almost seems to me al-Qaeda is going to have trouble winding up with any substantial presence in Iraq, possibly regardless of what we do. I mean, the Sunni Ba'athists have the home field advantage. I mean, I just don't see how they lose against the jihadists if they want them more or less out of the country, right?
But, well, it's the tribes. Well, a lot of the tribes have done it. The Ba'athists, it's still unclear. The Ba'athists are very unpopular. I mean, there's, I think we often forget in this, I mean, there's a lot of awful stuff that Saddam did. I mean, you have to understand that it was a sadistic state. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But Iraqis are still, like, he's their Hitler to most Iraqis. And I don't feel bad saying that. But these tribal leaders, and these tribal leaders aren't angels. I mean, I wrote a column before I left about this guy, Sheikh Abdul Sattar al-Rashawi, and I don't regret writing it, but since I've been here, I mean, listen, he was probably, like, leading a bunch of highway bandits. I mean, there's a lot of criminal activity, too. But yeah, no, we're getting people turning on al-Qaeda in this constituency in the provinces where they were strongest, and that's a good thing. But right now, they're openly asking us to stay and help them and give them weapons. And I sort of feel that as long as they're asking, we should be obliged to do that. And
yeah, although you got to ask, how are those weapons going to be used in the end? I mean, after Al Qaeda's gone, those weapons could well wind up being on one half of a civil war that the other half of which we're also arming. But look, I personally, although I oppose the war, I have not felt clear on what we should do at this point. I'm not.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Good for you. I wish there were more on your side now. I mean, I haven't kept up as much from Baghdad because of the internet connection, so it's harder for me to kind of get a pulse on it. But it seems, I mean, I'm asking you, the tenor of the debate on the war right now has really become, it seems very entrenched with both sides, right? I mean, it's
yeah, it's pretty intense. I mean, part of it is, the Democrats in Congress have decided to make an issue of it. I personally suspect that this may be even a political mistake on their part, depending on how things play out. So I'm not even sure the political wisdom of it. As for withdrawal, I'm not at all sure it's a bad idea. It's such a chaotic system, I don't purport to know. I also think once you do invade a country, you do have a moral responsibility. So it's no longer, that's one reason I wasn't enthusiastic about doing it. You acquire a lot of responsibilities. But, I think once you're there, the question is no longer just what's good for America, I'm sorry to say. You did it, and you own it, and that's one reason I think it's complicated. I mean, at the same time, I don't trust Bush's judgment, because I think he, at this point, has got to be thinking about his legacy, and of course, if we withdraw, then so much for his legacy. It was a failure. Whereas so long as we stay there, there's a chance, in his mind, that things could work out. So I don't trust his psychological state as a guide to this, and that's why...
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, that's why I could see the position the Democrats are taking as an actual principled position, if that's what they're thinking, and probably some of them are. But anyway, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, listen, I think that Bush is the commander-in-chief, and everything in his presidency is riding on this war. I mean, no one's going to remember this Attorney General scandal. It's all going to be the war. That's his legacy. You're right. But he has, I think, kind of subcontracted the war, as I understand it, to General Petraeus. And General Petraeus is not a partisan. He understands, I mean, privately, people around Petraeus will tell you that he's very, very serious. If by August he doesn't think the war is winnable, he will pull the plug. And there will be nothing, politically it will be impossible for Bush at that point to, after chastising the Democrats for not giving Petraeus a chance and not listening to Petraeus, to then not listen to Petraeus himself and replace him with another general. I think it was smart to get rid of General Casey, who was not delivering on a plan. Democrats and Republicans were saying, this is not working, what are you going to do? He did come up with a new plan. He found what, by all accounts, might be the best guy we've got on counterinsurgency, if not the best general we have in the military to do it. The one thing is, most of the, almost all the officers you talk to here are in awe of General Petraeus.
He's a very smart.
Yeah, he's a really smart
like,
guy. And we have an intellectual army now, which is wonderful. It's a really great thing. I mean, this is like a story that at some point I really would like to spend a lot of time on and just go to West Point and see. But I'm just sort of, and people have written about it before, but it's just, you have a lot of these officers who are really, really bright. And
you do,
and
for reasons
general, it's great. I mean,
but for reasons I've never understood, that the Army's intellectuals tend to be colonels and lieutenant colonels and not generals. There must be a structural reason for that, but
no, I'm saying that there's maybe lieutenant colonels and colonels are trying to kind of get through the system, but I mean, you will not get past lieutenant colonel pretty much now if you don't have a master's degree. But more importantly, it's just this sort of people are just really curious. It's a really good thing to see. It's something that, you don't think about. But in the military, in the officer corps at least, there's a lot of self-motivated intellectuals. People want to read on their own, which is really cool. And Petraeus really embodies that. I mean, he gave this Sheikh Abdel Sattar al-Rashawi a copy of Machiavelli's The Prince in Arabic. And I think, I know he gave him that book, and I think he also gave him the Federalist Papers. So, I mean, that to me is really cool stuff. And anyway, so if Petraeus is really serious, he's saying, listen, I'm prepared to examine whether the war is not winnable or not, and whether we have to cut our losses, then that strikes me as, that's pretty fair. I don't think Petraeus is out for Bush's legacy. In fact, I think Petraeus is out for Petraeus. I think Petraeus has probably political ambitions himself, and he understands that he will be a hero to Democrats if he pulls the plug on the war, because he's the one who can stop it. So
I was going to.
Yeah, why can't we just agree? Let's hope to win, and we'll get back to you in August, September, when Petraeus tells us what's going on. I mean, I trust him.
The first thing I thought of when you said, I am told that if it's not working in August, he'll just say so, is, well, that would be smart on his part, right? I mean, that's the way you detach yourself from a sinking ship, and that's not a bad thing. We're all career motivated. That's not a cynical, that's not a bad manifestation of careerism. That's one that would actually work in the national interest. So
I'm
fine.
just saying, why do Democrats want to make it an issue now? And I don't have an insight into the thinking. I mean, I was going to ask you.
I think part of it is that they were, there was some constituency inertia left over from the election that got them into Congress. And I don't understand politics well enough to know why you can't immediately turn your back on the most energetic of your backers after you win a big election. But I think part of it is that
those people are going to be. They're going to be a boat anchor around the Democratic Party. Let them go to Nader or the next generation of Nader. They're a bad rap.
Hey, Eli, sorry, but the reason we're in Iraq is because we let them go to Nader in 2000. But I don't want to. Don't. That's too painful for me to think about. Don't get
Honestly,
me there.
I'm going to blow your mind. All right, maybe I won't blow your mind. I actually think there's a very good chance.
Make my day.
I'm going to give you a counterfactual, and I'm going to be the only one. But I think Gore maybe wouldn't have invaded this way. But I think Gore was an Iraq hawk before. Had he not acted, there would have been a bunch of people, because Iraq was this big issue, who would have probably said, there would have been people on the other side saying, hey, and I think Gore would have been open to it. Gore understood what a threat Saddam was. He just, the way it was done, the timing, you can argue, but I think Gore would have eventually done something about it. I don't know if he would have done it this way. I really do. I'm telling you.
I don't want to waste your time in Baghdad with the opportunity to give us firsthand impressions by arguing that. I actually have a reply to that, and we'll take you up on that at some point. But what I want to ask you is, what are you able to from there get a clearer sense of the story with the surge? I mean, one thing I'm unclear about is as far as the surge goes, is over what realm has it been deployed? Okay, it's Baghdad, right? And then what?
It's Baghdad.
You tell me. On Baghdad and Anbar.
But to be honest, and I don't think I'm giving away any details. I think that having soldiers in one place allows you to put other soldiers in other places. So part of the surge basically can be thought of as chase al-Qaeda from whence they come, right? And the major part of the surge can be thought of as secure Baghdad from ethnic cleansers. So establish what they call MIT teams, which are American and Iraqi teams, in individual neighborhoods that are effectively, I don't know the military terminology, but they're effectively kind of patrolling the neighborhood and setting it up. In some cases, like in Adamiyah, the local commander just decided to build a wall because he said, I can't do anything with these people coming in and out. So it is going neighborhood by neighborhood. And I don't trust, and I'm not saying that the New York Times or the stringers for the New York Times or the AP are wrong. There have been these stories that there's been a spike in bodies found in the river, and I've asked around, like, who counts bodies in the river? And it's just very difficult to get straight information. The Iraqi government, I'm not saying the Iraqi government is a receptacle of great information either. It's just not a lot of good information. So it's hard for me to give you a statistic to say the surge is working. And it's wrong, I think, for anybody to get into that argument right now. But the one thing you can say is neighborhood by neighborhood, and you can sort of do it anecdotally. Now, I have yet to go into the Baghdad phase of my embedding, which I actually do tomorrow. So I can get back to you if we do this again, but I will. But I will go to one of these teams and one of these Iraqi American, sort of units that are patrolling a neighborhood, and I can say, well, what do you find? And that's the best way I think you can do it. Now, people who have been on those patrols, and they are embedding many journalists in Baghdad to see how this is going, which I would argue kind of to the military's credit they're doing that. And, you'll see. People who have come back have given you, to be honest with you, mixed results. Some people say that they're seeing, that it's not, cakes and flowers, but it's quieter and it's better. Other people are saying that it's impossible to sort of get a sense of it because no one will come out of their house. The only time they do is to shoot at you. So, as I said, I think at this point it's a mixed bag. The surge has not yet fully arrived. And, you're going to have to see. The one thing that definitely seems to have worked so far is that Muqtada Sadr is still not in Iran. He called a big rally in Najaf. Less people showed up to that rally.
He's still not in Iran, or he's still not in Iraq, or he's still not in Iran?
Well, he's believed to be in Iran, but that is like...
In Iran.
We don't know. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, you hear from a lot of people where he is. Most people, the U.S. military believes he's in Iran. That's for sure.
Right.
The Kurds don't think he's in Iran. Other people will tell you that he's really in Baghdad. And he's about to. I mean, there's a whole, but he hasn't shown his face in public. That's the key. And Iraqis apparently think he's in Iran, which is good because it takes away from his nationalist credentials. It looks like he's afraid. He held, a couple weeks ago, he called a big anti-American rally in Najaf. Less people apparently showed up to that than earlier stuff when Sadr would call things. There has been talk of the split in the Mahdi army, though. It's as I said, it's hard to get a judge on that. And I hope you're not upset with me about this, but I can't give you we're winning, the surge is working. I can't do that, but I also can't say it's not working, and I'm still trying to kind of collect information on that.
Okay, but it's when we hear news about, from Baghdad and Anbar that it is news reflecting on the surge, basically.
Yeah.
And the other question is it the case that if it worked in those areas, it would ultimately have to be deployed over a much wider area before the whole thing kind of worked?
Well, no, I mean, the Anbar part of the surge is not meant to send units to, stay and kind of in the way that the Baghdad part is. The Baghdad is to win back the city, okay? The Baghdad is to stem the ethnic cleansing. And so that's the mission there. But the Baghdad part, the Anbar part of the surge is really to and they're doing this a lot with Iraqis, which is better, is to find Al-Qaeda where they are and kill them. And they're probably in Diyala right now. So don't be surprised if part of the surge, or part of the troops for that, or whatever, however they sort of end up going there. Because where they are, there will be military operations, I'm sure, to find Al-Qaeda wherever they go. So people talk about that water balloon and, one part goes there. But it doesn't mean that, they're going to stay there. Because the part of the surge that was in Anbar is to try to just get Al-Qaeda where they are and to facilitate that. And one of the things that they're doing in Anbar, which is great, is they're trying to build this Anbar Salvation Front and this new political party that's Sunni Iraqi, but is against Al-Qaeda. And they're doing that, they're going to try to maybe do that in Diyala and other places, and that's a good thing.
Okay. So do you get what you feel is authentic contact with Iraqis?
I've gotten authentic contact with Iraqis because of my contacts with Iraqi politicians that I've known for a while. So I can go out with them, and they know Iraqis. Like one of my heroes. Of course,
they're not taking pains, possibly. They're probably not exposing you to a random selection of Iraqis.
Well,
right?
As random as it can get. I probably, I hate to say this because I really like John McCain, so it pains me to say this, but when he went to that marketplace, all the vendors in that marketplace were like screened to, you know what I'm saying? It was like, it wasn't, you can't, I mean, I don't get the impression that you could do it anywhere. Anytime I've traveled in Baghdad, whether it was to the airport or to, to go out and see some folks, you have to travel in a convoy, whether it's with, Peshmerga or other militia guys. You have to, it's you got to wear your, you got to wear your body armor, and you got to have, guys with guns out the windows, and that's.
So he kind of had to know. He kind of had to know that was fake. In other words.
Well, I mean, I wanted, I really wanted to believe it, and I didn't believe it, but then, people were joking about it here in the press facility. I mean, soldiers were like, why did he say that? Now, I'll tell you something, interesting theory. The reason McCain said that and picked a fight with Michael Ware, and the reason he said bomb on Iran, is because he's running for nomination in the presidency of the Republican Party. And those things happen when you're running as a Republican, and the problem with him before was the Republicans didn't think he was Republican enough. So when you pick fights with CNN reporters who have funny accents and you sing a Beach Boys song about bombing Iran, that earns you a lot of cred with the red states. Speaking of red states, I have to mention that staying in the green zone right now are Victoria Coates and Jeff Emanuel from redstate.org. So there you go. I wanted to say that.
Well, there you go.
Yes, and they're very nice people, by the way. I just met them. They're very nice people.
Mm-hmm. So you're not hanging out with the lefty bloggers while you're there.
Lefties come through. This woman from San Francisco who I'm forgetting her name right now.
No, well, San Francisco seals it right there. She must be a lefty.
No, but she really was. Cameron Stillwater was. They were all kind of, I have friends from Time Magazine who I talk to. I don't know if they're lefties. I mean, I just, I've seen a lot of people here.
Although, one of them, a lefty friend of yours, whom you could also have a conversation like this with fruitfully, who is stateside right now, but who has been to Iraq, is Spencer Ackerman.
Yeah, Spencer was here. Yeah, he was actually in this facility. I mean, he ran into people. I told them that I knew Spencer, and people kind of chuckled because I'm coming in from a little different point of view. But yeah.
Yeah, well, if you can do this again, maybe we should match you up with him. But I also wanted to say, I think it's kind of a tribute to the American government or something that he gets to go over there. You know what I mean? I mean, because if they've bothered to read his blog, right? They know that it's not going to be good PR.
Yeah.
Right? No, when I hear he's going over there, I think, gee, is this a great country or what? And I mean that. I mean, this is, it's not, they're not exercising the kind of propaganda control that you might think they would.
Well, the whole idea of the embed is we have nothing to hide. We're doing a great thing. And, come over here. Now, listen, that's the military side of it. It's impossible to move around here, so it's hard to get a lot of information done. I mean, even, the people who are not in the green zone, who are in the Hamra Hotel facility, the New York Times and everything, and I've been there the last time, they're in a little fortified area as well. And they rely on Iraqi stringers. It's just really, really hard to operate, particularly in Baghdad. And I did want to mention before we wrap this up, I went to Kurdistan, and I don't want to put this in terms of an American. I mean, I actually was really moved by Kurdistan. It's not perfect. Journalists are still probably occasionally, roughed up. On the anniversary of Kurdish journalism, they beat up a photographer in Erbil, which is sad. And there's other things. There's complaints of corruption. So I don't want to say it's completely with rose-colored glasses, but it is really, to see normal life and hopefulness and people who really like Americans and think this war was a great idea meet the Kurds. And the other thing is they're so enthusiastic about detaining terrorists and stopping terrorism, which is really good. And I think that they're excellent allies. And I just came away with, and I understand the complications, but I think America should offer some sort of security guarantee to the Kurds. They're very worried about Turkey. They're very worried about Iran. They are very afraid because they're not Arabs, they're Kurds, that they're going to get blamed for the dissolution of Iraq. And I think that for moral reasons, but I would also argue for very sound kind of national interest reasons, because they are really going to be dedicated allies and better allies, I think, than almost everyone else in the region, except for Israel and maybe Turkey, that we should really reach out to them, and they deserve our friendship. We should atone for the sins of Kissinger and Bush 1, if you will. And
yeah, although
speaking
of
and also, can I tell the Blogging Heads viewers, Bob, and then I'll get off my Kurdistan thing. Go to Erbil and go there for vacation. It's beautiful. There's beautiful, green, rolling mountains, excellent cheese, really excellent cheese.
Probably pretty inexpensive, too. I'll bet we have a favorable exchange rate now.
Yeah, it's fairly inexpensive. There's really not much. I mean, you'll see Peshmerga militia guys, or they're now kind of more of an army, but not much of a war going on there. Very friendly people, and a very interesting like histories in the Middle East. So if you're, it's for a rough guide, but you could shove in your backpack. You can get a flight from, I think, Newark to Erbil. And it's just I would say it's very much worth it. If you like to hike, it's just a lot of beautiful scenery there. So vacation.
I can bring my family and everything, and
my
family will be safe.
You're going to go fishing. You'll love it. It's the other Iraq. It's like our consolation prize. And I don't think it's a bad consolation prize, because these people are very deserving of self-determination, and they want it very badly. And they're excellent. It's a very good thing to see. I've known some of these Kurdish leaders for a very long time. I've known Barham Saleh for a while, and others. And I have to tell you, it's really something to see this. Baghdad is definitely a mess right now. And that saddens me. But to see Kurdistan, I just have to say it's a good thing. I'm hopeful, and I would recommend people vacation there.
Well, I made a prediction actually a while ago, like a year and a half ago or something, that at some point we would start seeing the American right favoring the partition and even outright breakup of Iraq, because it would become clear that our only hope for maintaining military bases there, or the only smooth path to that, would be for there to be a country called Kurdistan, and they would love for us to have military bases there. And I'm still not sure that's not going to wind up being the case. That there
will be. I'm not favoring yet the full partition. Though there's nothing you can do to stop federalism in Iraq. That's certainly true. And I was in the airport. You go through passport control, and then you go to passport control, and you're coming back into Baghdad. So there is. We don't have their own currency yet, but it's kind of inching that way. But listen. I talked to a lot of Kurds, I interviewed a lot of people there, and I'm still kind of writing a lot of stuff up. Here's the thing. They know that they're closer than they've ever been, but they're not going to declare an independent, that's not going to happen. The one thing they're going to do is they're going to keep fighting over Kirkuk, but that's about it. They're not going to declare, this is not going to happen, because things are going fairly well, better than they have in these prospects, and it's really something, and I don't want to get, I know there's a lot of strong feelings about the war, and there should be a lot of complicated feelings about the war. But to see a country, and with their leaders, in the midst of that, these people are going to be, they really are Kurdish George Washingtons, maybe, that they finally are sort of achieving this dream. It's really moving, and I'd say.
Well, it's fine, but I will say that if all we get out of this is an independent Kurdistan, there was an easier way to do that. That it had essentially slipped beyond Saddam's control before the war, right?
Well, yes, and I'm not ready to give up on Iraq yet, and I want to make that very clear. That I think as long as there are a lot of Iraqis who are willing to fight for it, I think that we should be willing to fight for it, as you sort of use that line, and I think it's worth fighting for. But I don't think the independence of Kurdistan necessarily is it, but to see to see the University of Sulaymaniyah, and to see that there's they're building these Kurdish traditions and so forth, and and to see this sort of awakening there. And that is somewhat moving. It doesn't. I'm not trying to say it makes up for it, but at some point, if we had to sort of accept what was happening in the rest of Iraq, and there was nothing we could do to change it, and so the Iraqis just would rather kill each other, which I don't think is the case at this point. But it may be that we have to make that judgment. Then I think that Kurdistan is a little bit of is some more than a little bit. It's a lot of good that has come out of the Iraq War.
And not a bad place for a couple of American military bases, probably.
No, they would love it. They want nothing more than...
Yeah.
This is the difference. I'll tell you the difference. In Baghdad, there are Iraqis who are in the police and who are working in the Iraqi army, and they go out and they work on counterterrorism, but they have to wear masks because they're afraid that their families or that they will be assassinated later if their identities are known. In Kurdistan, working with the Americans, working on counterterrorism is a source of great pride, and it is a great pride for your family. And that is why I think that they are going to be allies for generations, which is something that you can't really put a price on, because I think that when we ally with Saudi Arabia, they help us in some respects, but they also don't help us, and they hurt us in other respects. And we're never going to get the kind of full commitment that we're going to get from Kurds who really do see that their interests are lined up with ours.
Well, maybe this solves a long-standing puzzle. It is the case, is it not, that for some time, people of your ideological persuasion have had kind of an affinity for these Kurds. I mean, William Safire used to write, I would say every third column about the need for, about Kurdish nationalism. Not that only people on the right side, favor that, but has the idea been all along that, look, aside from Israel, the most secure base with the most heartfelt support of America in that region possible is in Kurdistan? Has that long been the idea?
It's really, can I tell you, well, first of all, it's tricky, because since the Israelis have, had diplomatic relations and sort of aligned with the Turks, it's made the sort of right's interest and support of Kurdistan. I think I attribute it to two things. That one is the skill of envoys, and if I can say, people like, President Talabani's son, Kubat Talabani, Barham Saleh, and I could go on, there have been a sort of generation of Kurdish leaders, largely on what used to be the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan side, that have been excellent envoys for the Kurdish cause. And so when you spend time with people like that, I think that right and left, it's hard not to support them, because they make a very strong case and they're very persuasive. Secondly, there's a lot of antipathy, and I don't see actually why there wouldn't be more antipathy just across the ideological spectrum to kind of Arab nationalism, which is an exhausted idea, and Kurdish nationalism is a wonderful antidote to Arab nationalism. So I kind of always supported the Kurdish cause for those two reasons, but then going to Kurdistan really just made it more tangible. They're just so, and I see, I talked to there are Kurds who are in Iran, and they've organized, and they're, the kind of greater Kurdish idea is that in almost everywhere where Kurds are oppressed, except for Turkey, but in Syria and Iran, they're being oppressed by regimes that I'd like to change. So it's a nice confluence of interests.
Well, maybe your affinity for regime change is as good a note as any to draw this to a close on, Eli.
Okay.
It gives the last 4 years a certain symmetry.
Yes.
But I really appreciate your doing this and taking the time.
No, I love doing the show, and thanks for having me. And I'm glad you should have more voices from the right. I think it's a place to have blogging is great because it's a place to have a civil discussion where we can go back and forth and make points, but not in a kind of screaming match way, which is really great, because that's not, my personality,
Right, and we're not in the same room anyway, so it can't get truly violent. So that's all good. And I'm also glad we, don't have time for you to scream at me about my neocon bashing Times op-ed piece. But I will just
really like the other column about growing up in the military and how it's a great level.
I knew you
that
would.
Much more now.
I was targeting your constituency with that one, Eli. But I will reread the email you sent me about the neocon bashing New York Times as penance for writing it. Okay.
Oh. Okay. All right.
And really, thanks a lot. And I hope you have time to do this again. And stay safe. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. See ya.
Okay. Bye.